So you see the sign, is war wrong? That's what we're asking people right now. What are your thoughts on that, huh?
I mean, I'd say that war, like to start a war, is wrong. There have definitely been cases in history, and even cases now where war was necessary at the end of the day. But like in a perfect world, we wouldn't have war.
Okay.
That's I think how I'd put it. Yeah.
Gotcha. So starting war is wrong. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have it.
No.
Yeah. What's is there a case in mind that you have today of a war that you think was wrong to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we're like the Russia-Ukraine war.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And why do you personally think it was wrong for Russia to invade Ukraine?
I mean,
I agree with you that it was.
I don't like. I mean, I can obviously rebuke any of the sort of propaganda reasons for which they did it. Like, there wasn't a reason to do it. And looking now, 3 years in the future, you're looking at over 100,000 Russians dead, right?
Crazy.
A lot more wounded.
Yep.
Obviously, there's Ukrainians' lives lost, and all for what? Like for nothing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So for you, it'd be the massive loss of life, is what makes it wrong. You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would agree with you. I mean, I think it's definitely a tragedy, right? What is it about lots of people being killed for land or for nationalistic, fervor, pride, that's wrong in your view? Yeah. I agree that it is, but like, why do you think it's wrong?
People, they have relationships. They sort of contribute to life. It's just a loss generally. It's unnecessary.
Okay. Yeah. So because it's unnecessary for them to die, that's why it's wrong in your view?
I think so too.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious, like why. I would agree with you. It certainly seems like a unnecessary loss of life. But why do you think it's wrong for lots of people to be killed for what seems to be unnecessary, not worth it, right? Taking more territory.
I do think life is precious, right? And to take away life, for like I said, for no reason, that is just wrong.
Yeah,
like,
I agree with you. Yeah, taking life for no reason, an innocent life at least, for no reason. Yeah, that's wrong. But why do you feel like that's wrong personally?
I mean, that's just like sort of how it was, I guess, brought up, like my ethical view of the world. I don't think taking. Yeah.
You weren't brought up to think that killing innocent people was a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Didn't grow up in a family of mercenaries or whatever.
No,
I agree with you, man. Obviously, I was raised the same way. I would think there's probably a difference between asking how we came to believe that and asking why is that belief true? Because like I was raised to believe that killing innocent people for no reason was wrong. But that's different than explaining why it's true that it's wrong, right? And that's one of the things we're really curious asking people about here with really any moral question, but right now specifically war. What's behind our view of the morality of war? We think it's wrong for Russia to invade Ukraine, for hundreds of thousands, if not more, to die for no good reason, right? Innocent people dying for no good reason. Why is that wrong? What do you think?
I want to hear, like, if that's okay, I want to hear your perspective on this, just
sure,
so
man.
I am seeing, like, what ballpark, I guess, you want me.
Well, I mean, like, I think that it's wrong. I don't think that morality is just a matter of opinion. And I'd be interested in hearing if you agree with that. Like, I think that Russia invading Ukraine and all the people that have died as a result of it, I think that was wrong of them to do, regardless of what people think. Like, I don't think it's just a matter of opinion. Are you on board with that? You agree with that too?
I'd agree, though. I think, like I think we start at the start. Like, there have been, say, wars in history where people have died, and it's a tragedy that they died. But, for example, the United States, like, intervening in the Second World War and us invading, like, I think you would agree as well that was something that was necessary.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think in some ways, I guess, you can put an opinion on something that's happening.
No, we can definitely have an opinion on it. Well, what I'm saying is I don't think our opinion and Russia's opinion are no more valid than the other. I don't think it's just a matter of it. I think my opinion is actually correct and theirs is wrong. Like, they're incorrect. Because killing lots of innocent people for no good reason is morally wrong. That's not just a matter of opinion, right? But it's really crazy when you start to ask why. Like, why is it wrong? Why is it wrong to kill innocent people for no reason? And I personally think, I'd be really curious in hearing what you think of this, Mark. I think morality offers us a pretty amazing insight into reality. Because we know that certain things are right or wrong regardless of what people think, regardless of what people believe. And when we think about moral values, like love and justice and patience and mercy and those kind of things, they seem like they can only exist in a person. And so if we're to ask, what's the standard for moral values? What is it that we're pointing to say, this is what's morally good? Whatever that standard for moral values is, seems like it has to be some kind of person. Because moral values can only exist in a person, right?
Yeah.
So moral values, they seem to point us to some kind of transcendent personal being that's the ultimate standard for moral values. And similarly, when we think about moral laws, like things we're required to do or forbidden to do, like I'm required to act justly, I'm forbidden from killing innocent people for no good reason, right? Moral laws also make the most sense if there's some kind of person in authority requiring us to act certain ways and forbidding us to act other ways, right? So moral laws also seem to point us to some kind of transcendent being, some kind of transcendent person that's the moral lawgiver. So just to kind of summarize those two things, moral values, moral laws, they both point us to some kind of transcendent person that's the ultimate standard for moral values and the moral lawgiver. And those are two big parts of what many people conceive of God to be, right? What's your reaction? Have you ever heard something like that before?
I think I've definitely heard like parts of what you said, but I think you put it very nicely.
Okay. Yeah. I'm curious, what's your response to that? I know it's kind of hard to think of things off the top of your head, so no worries if you don't have like
when you say God, you mean the Christian God, or you mean like a general God figure?
General God. Yeah. So I'm like a Christian personally, but I don't think this argument proves the existence of the God of any particular religion.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I would say that throughout like human history, what we consider moral and immoral has very much shifted.
For sure.
Like if you take 2 centuries back, I mean, obviously we had slavery in America, which I think nowadays I would hope most people would consider to be very much a moral evil.
Yeah.
But back then it wasn't, and surely back then if there was like these values come from a entity, divine entity, it obviously was around at the time. And even now, obviously there's like moral debates, I'd say. So while wider things, I think most people agree on morality, but then there's like moral debates with things like the death penalty, abortion, sort of things like that. So I would say
That's a great point.
that certainly there existing kind of disagreements in morality sort of contradicts that.
Yeah.
So,
It contradicts the idea that there's an actual standard
that there's
for moral values out there.
Yeah, that there's like a divine morality.
Okay. So what would you say, Mark, then that morality is ultimately just a matter of opinion?
I think so, but I also think there's just correct opinions.
Okay, well,
Like,
I would agree with you on
yeah.
that. Yeah. So, like, here's the thing. Like, I think you're absolutely right. If you go back a couple hundred years, even in our own country, African American slavery, at least by a lot of people in society, it was viewed as morally permissible, right? But I think they were incorrect about that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that was just their opinion and this is my opinion and neither opinion is more valid than the other. I think that my opinion is correct.
Yeah.
Because I think it's actually wrong. Like, I think it's wrong, regardless of what people think, to kidnap Africans from their own country, bring them to America, and enslave them, and specifically oppress them in such an awful way, too, right? But then if we're saying, okay, it's wrong no matter what people think, the question is why? Like, what's the standard out there that we're referring to?
That's interesting. I really don't know. I think it's just something about how humans work where we kind of, whether it's from just the way we're brought up, like the whole like nature versus nurture, like you could say that maybe it's nurture as people have sort of gotten more educated, started seeing each other as equals. There's been sort of a shift in morality, and is what like is responsible for these changes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's possible. I think you can explain why people have different moral opinions. I think that's a different question, though, than asking which ones are correct.
Yeah.
Like, I might have an opinion that the Earth is round, but clearly that's incorrect. So, and I could explain to you, maybe why I came to have that opinion, and it might be interesting to know that. But that's a different question than asking, is my opinion actually correct? You know what I'm saying?
I look at like even the current day morals we have, and who knows, maybe in like 100, 200 years, people are going to look at them and say, wow, these are wrong.
Maybe.
Like, certainly I think now a lot of people have like ideas of like borders and things, right?
Yep.
And I mean, hell, it's even ideas that I would go ahead and sort of agree with. But maybe like 200 years down the future, there's like no countries. It's all like a free and people. And like I'm just sort of throwing out theoretical. Yeah. And people go look like, why would you exclude other people from like your land? Like that seems like something that is immoral. Maybe you have them living in like a poverty area, and you only. I'm just saying like. I agree with you that there's morals that I think are concrete, like killing is bad, but I just think it's kind of a very 50-50 split almost, where we have the morals that we see as being concrete, and a lot of those morals back in the day people didn't see as being, and then there's morals that there are sort of disagreements on. And I think that this flow of morals kind of means that it can't come from a place, you know?
Yeah. So help me understand what you're saying, Mark, because I completely agree with you. Our moral views might be different 100 years from now than they are right now. But are you saying then that there is no such thing as something being really right and really wrong, that it's all just a matter of cultural opinion, societal opinion, personal opinion?
Well, I think both of those can be true. Within, like, say, our American society, people generally all agree that something like murder is wrong.
Sure, yeah.
And so that makes it a total opinion.
Yeah. And what if they didn't, though? What if they all believed that African American slavery was morally permissible? Do you think it would still be wrong?
It would still be wrong, yes.
Yeah, I agree. So that means it's not just a matter of opinion then. Some things are wrong regardless of people's opinions.
That's true, but it's also then like I set my morals on the things I believe.
Yeah.
Somebody could set their morals on the things they believe, and they could be standing here in my shoes, but the things they could believe I could consider morally wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, people have different moral opinions. I think it's impossible to doubt. Yeah, the question we're getting at here is morality, at the end of the day, nothing more than a matter of opinion, perhaps influenced by our upbringing or evolution or society or whatever? Is that really all morality is? My moral senses tell me no. My moral senses say that some things are wrong no matter what people think. Like, even if the entire world thought African American slavery was morally permissible, I don't think it would be. I think it would still be wrong. Even if everyone in the world thought killing innocent people for no reason was morally permissible, I don't think it would be. I think it would still be wrong.
Yeah.
The question, of course, is why. Like, why is it wrong then? You know, what's the standard that we're referring to?
I say, like, maybe let's move past this point, just because I think I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think you also agree with what I'm saying. It's just I don't believe, like, those sort of extend to all morals.
Oh, yeah. No, I think you're right about that.
And
yeah.
And so for that reason, I wouldn't be able to, like, I guess, agree with the claim that it all just stems from one place where there's like a set in stone, etched in set of morals.
Yeah.
No, war is not wrong.
Yeah, and I think you're right, man. I think there's a difference between, like, you know, between cultures in terms of what's accepted as modest and what's not. And that's something that people can have different opinions on, and maybe there is no correct answer. I also think there are other things that are certainly wrong regardless of people's opinions, like torturing babies for fun, like enslaving people because of their race, like, you know, like genocide. You know, those kind of things are wrong no matter what people's opinions are. And even if we just recognize that some things are wrong, you know, and like they're really wrong, it's not just a matter of opinion. If we recognize that some things are really wrong no matter what people think, the answer, I think, I think the conclusion is unavoidable, that there's a standard out there for moral values. And since moral values can only exist in a person, that standard's got to be some kind of personal being. And if we really are under some kind of moral law where we're required to act certain ways and we're prohibited from acting other ways, that seems to make the most sense if there's actually someone in authority above us that is requiring us to do certain things and forbidding us from doing other things. I think morality is pretty compelling evidence for the existence of a being that's at least similar to what many people conceive of God to be, right? Maybe we can't say it's the Christian God or the Muslim God or the Jewish God or the God of any particular religion, but it's a transcendent personal being that's the moral lawgiver and the ultimate standard for goodness. And you can even go a little bit further beyond that. I mean, if morality is eternal and unchanging, that this being must also be eternal and unchanging. And, you know, when we think about things that are morally good, since this being's the standard for moral values, this being must be loving, this being must be just, this being must be patient and merciful and loyal and faithful and trustworthy. So you can learn quite a bit about what this being's like. And it seems like he's made his law known to us on our hearts. Like, it seems like we all have a sense of what we're required to do, what we're forbidden to do. So it's almost as if he's made his law and even made himself known in our consciences, in our heart of hearts. I'm curious what your reaction is to that. Like, as you hear me saying those things, what's kind of your gut reaction to it, you think?
So, first of all, I think what you're saying about there being a possibility of a creator, I think that's understandable, and I tend to even sometimes agree. Like, I myself am kind of, a lot of the time I sort of personally religiously shift between like an atheist and a more like an agnostic worldview. I think what like you say about the being in him, I guess, endowing into us sort of values. Once again, the only reason why like I tend to disagree is because I just look at, even in the past, but even now, there obviously exist evil people, you know?
Yeah, for sure, man.
And so that's what kind of makes me question it, because if we are, I guess, created naturally with these values, with these ideas, then how does that explain where there are a lot of bad people out there?
Yeah.
And I also feel like, because those people, they aren't like single cases, like at the end of the day, there's a lot of them in the world that have been.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good question, man. I mean, for what it's worth, I think that just because some people don't follow the moral law doesn't mean that a moral law doesn't exist. And it might be somewhat similar to saying that, this water fountain here, this water fountain really exists, right? If I'm blind, I might not be able to see it, but it doesn't change the fact that it exists. You know what I'm saying? Similarly, it really is true that taking innocent people's lives for no reason is wrong. That's the case regardless of people's opinions. But if somebody's morally blind, if someone has a seared conscience, if someone was raised in a culture that is really morally messed up, then maybe they might think it's okay to sacrifice their children to a fake god or whatever. And you could see how they came to be morally blind to that, right? But it doesn't change the fact that it's still wrong what they're doing. Like, the wrongness of killing a baby for some kind of religious ritual seems to be just as real as the water fountain right there. Like, just because someone doesn't see that it's wrong doesn't change the fact that it is wrong. Just because a blind person doesn't see it there doesn't change the fact that it is there. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I honestly think this is a good maybe place to end the conversation.
Yeah, sure,
just
man.
Because,
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming over and sharing your thoughts. That was a great discussion, and it was. I appreciate how open and honest you were too, in sharing your opinions and where you're at with stuff. And being an agnostic is a good place to be. Being open-minded to trying to figure out what's the best way to make sense of reality. And I think an important part of reality for us to make sense of is our moral experience, right? I think we all know that there are certain things that are good or bad, right or wrong, no matter what people think. Why is that the case? I don't know, man. I think it's going to be hard to avoid the conclusion that there's something out there that's a lot like what many people think God is. So, but yeah, thanks again for coming over. It was a great conversation, Mark.